All right, well, we are going to go ahead and get started. Thank you so much, everyone, and thank you so much for joining Scanco today on our partner webcast series. My name is Andrew Neal, and I'm the Director of Partners and Alliances here at Scanco. We're extremely excited today as we have our guest and close partner, SPS Commerce, joining us today to educate us not only on how we can ship smarter with our mutual software packages, but also highlight to all of you the many challenges that companies are facing without an EDI solution. Today we have Matt Wessing, Senior Sales Manager from SPS, to run us through their presentation. After Matt takes us through the EDI presentation, I will take some time to run through the Scanco warehouse and how we can leverage robust scanning software to incorporate EDI into our warehouse processes. So as we go through the presentation, many of you may have questions. We will have a Q&A section at the end of the presentation to go through all of those questions. With that said, if you're anything like me, you might want to write the questions down in the dashboard as we go through the presentation. So if you want to go ahead and do that, please feel free to do so, and we'll be happy to answer those questions at the end of the presentation. So just to highlight a quick agenda, we will kick off our presentation off with Matt as he's going to talk about how really order fulfillment has become complex and challenging for growing companies across the US. And then Matt's going to discuss the SPS Commerce approach and how SPS tackles EDI challenges. After Matt finishes up, I will jump into Scanco Warehouse and the many challenges we hear as a team. And then we will talk about Scanco Warehouse combined with the EDI solution and how that speeds up your warehouse movements and increases accuracy. At which point in time, we will wrap up with a Q&A at the end for anyone who has any questions. So with that being said, I'm going to hand things over to Matt, and Matt, take it away.
Andrew, thanks so much. And everyone, I appreciate you joining us, whether this is still morning and you're on the West Coast or you're in the afternoon. Appreciate the time today. As he mentioned, we have a great partnership between Scanco and SPS Commerce and a really fluid integration that we share in that Sage space. And so it's a pleasure and privilege to be able to join you today. What I want to speak to during my component here is really a holistic approach to how does a customer, or if you're a partner that's joining us right now, how might you help a customer to kind of holistically look at their entire order to cash process and really bring intentionality and strategy into streamlining that process so that they can manage the natural complexity that happens when a company is managing and fulfilling orders. What you see on the screen in front of you is really what SPS Commerce sees as increasing levels of complexity as you move from left to right, but really customers that fall into one of these four buckets. Obviously, you have sometimes customers that are getting into EDI for the first time, and so they go from that moment of having, realizing, hey, we're now officially going to be working with Walmart. This is awesome. And then Walmart says it is great. You're going to be EDI. And there's kind of that gulp moment of realizing all they can do is sell EDI, and that's as far as there's a compliance need there. SPS has a way to come alongside those customers with a web portal that scales according to the volume that they have and can get them compliant with that first EDI trading partner, removing that complexity, allowing them to connect and manage that order process. The goal, obviously, for every business is that they would grow and increase the number of trading partners. And as that business grows and the trading partners increase, so does the complexity. And so really working with companies to help them manage across multiple channels and partners and manage those change events so that they still have a scalable solution in place that they're able to work with. As we do that, there's also just the recognition that you begin interacting with your warehouse on the back end, and you need to work in such a way that you can seamlessly send information and receive information from the people working in the warehouse, actually working with physical product, and have that interaction and integration work well in that order to cash environment. And the other thing we always see then is obviously the opportunity that comes along with system change. Sometimes that's a customer who is an existing Sage 100 customer and they've been working in Sage for quite a while, and now they realize, hey, our EDI order volume has gotten to the point where we want to integrate it into that backend system, or they're doing a system change, and there's an opportunity there with that change event to kind of recalibrate how they're automating the orders and how they're set up. Andrew, you can jump to the next screen, please.
Thank you very much. Part of the pieces, or one of the major pieces of this complexity, is obviously the requirements of the trading partner that your customers work with. We kind of joke that EDI is the non-standard standard, right? The way that Walmart does EDI is different from how Kroger does EDI, is different from how Best Buy does it, and on down the line. The key here is to recognize for your customers, growth needs to be scalable. And so having a provider in the space that can help them manage those points of complexity, whether it's testing requirements, knowing the preferred method of communication for that trading partner, whether it's an AS2 or a VAN, et cetera, is a really important piece to make sure that your customer, or you as the customer, have peace of mind that you have a solution in place that regardless of who the new trading partner is or the number of trading partners, the person that's delivering this for you has expertise and it can scale with you as you grow. We want to make sure that you're never left vulnerable to requirements of new trading partners. We can go ahead again, Andrew. The other side of that coin is obviously every business has its own unique business processes. And so we have to take those trading partner requirements and actually build them into how do you receive orders, how do you handle them, and how do you manage them. And so really making sure that you have not just a one-size-fits-all approach from SPS, but that we can come alongside you and tailor how we're going to build out a new that's going to match the way that you actually run your business. And so a great example would be sometimes you have customers who they initially started with SPS just for EDI compliance. That volume increased, and so they began integrating those orders into their Sage 100 system. And then they added another ISV like Scanco so that they can have that tool in the warehouse as well, and making sure that they're also being intentional to connect the integration they have with SPS with the new tool or an existing tool that they have in the Scanco setup. We want to make sure that those business processes are taken into account as we automate and streamline the setup. We can move forward again. One of the things that we describe ourselves as is a full service provider. And really we are the only full service provider in the space. And really what distinguishes us as a full service compared to a managed service provider is the recognition that to do order to cash well, and really to do EDI specifically well, means you have to check 7 boxes. And really the question is only who's going to manage those different pieces that are required to do EDI. Is part of it going to be managed by a managed service provider and part of it managed and owned by the customer, or will all of it be taken on by a full service provider? And the question for the customer is really just one of, do you envision EDI being a core competency to your business? Do you want to have dedicated staff that they are the experts in EDI? You have them on staff, like they're full-time employees, and EDI is kind of their fastball. For some customers, that's the way that they want to approach it, and so a managed service is a better fit. What we often see, and you can jump forward here, Andrew, is that for a lot of customers, EDI is not really, it's not in their wheelhouse, it's not what their fastball is. They want to avoid slow onboarding processes, right? They don't want to have high IT costs, and they want to be insulated from chargeback and fees. And when that's really the goal of how you're approaching EDI, what you need is a full service provider. And we can move forward again. By full service, really what we're envisioning is SPS really becomes your outsourced EDI department. So it's providing technology in this space for Sage. It's a Mapadoc integration layer that lives natively within that Sage environment, and that trading partner expertise we already discussed. Trading partner communication, so standing in and making sure that as you're adding new trading partners, or a good example would be, in the last 18 months, Walmart added the requirement of an ASN for all of their trading partners. In this example, SPS actually has thousands of vendors that we connect to Walmart, so Walmart proactively reaches out to SPS to say, hey, we're going to be adding the ASN requirement. They let SPS know ahead of time. We build out that standard, and then we push that to all of those vendors in a seamless process. And so our vendors, those customers, are insulated from any of those change events happening with the trading partner, and SPS owns all of that communication on your behalf. The other major piece of that is SPS owning those testing and launch requirements of retailers, and then proactive monitoring and analysis. If that trading partner, in this instance, let's talk about Target, decides they're going to make a change to how they send the purchase order, knowing that and having visibility to that on SPS's side, where we can actually manage those change events on your behalf and make sure that there's never any sort of disruption to how you're receiving order to cash information is really important. At a high level, the vision behind full service is that you don't have to be EDI experts. You don't have to own EDI experts. One of the things that we've actually seen in the last year or two with COVID is all of a sudden there's a risk component in this when you have to all of a sudden push everybody remote. If you're owning that EDI piece and now you have a disruption in the ability of your teams to interact, that's now a piece of risk that makes you vulnerable to being able to maintain integrity in that order to cash process. By having a full service provider like SPS stand in to own all of it from beginning to end, you're able to insulate your team and just make sure that you always have a fully functional, fully deployable order to cash system that we can then automate into your Sage environment. You can jump forward ahead again, Andrew. We'll have a time here at the end, obviously, for Q&A. So as Andrew mentioned, if you have some, feel free to chat those questions as we're going. I can try to interact with them, and we can also have time at the end to just circle back around. One important thing to call out in terms of just the nature of order to cash right now, that's been accelerated in the last really 2 years with the pandemic we've been living in, is that the buying habits of consumers have changed. Obviously, there was a period where a lot of folks couldn't even go out to many of those brick and mortar retailers. And so if customers weren't already doing e-commerce, they were being forced to adapt really quickly, or they saw that e-commerce business go from a trickle that they managed really through a separate process and a manual environment to being fully open. The floodgates have come. We went from, hey, we got like 5 to 10 e-commerce orders a month to now we're seeing an influx of 50, 200, 1,000 e-commerce orders each month. And we just can no longer manage this process through the old manual process that we had. Well, ideally, as you build in automation, right, you want it to be scalable and you want it to be seamless across the different order channels that you have. And here's where SPS is really able to come alongside customers and provide that. Historically, we've managed kind of that third bucket. You see the wholesale side, EDI connections to traditional retailers. That's been a spot where SPS has been the industry leader for over 2 decades, but we now offer the opportunity to grab marketplace connections like Amazon, Walmart Marketplace, Target Plus, as well as e-commerce setups like Shopify, Magento, WooCommerce, BigCommerce, etc. We can pull all of that regardless of order channel, whether that's an e-commerce purchase order, a marketplace purchase order, or a traditional EDI purchase order, and automate all of that for the customer so that the end user who's working within that Sage 100 space has a single order to cash process that they manage, regardless of where the order is being sourced from. We can jump ahead again, Andrew. The benefit there is obviously just cleaning up how they're managing that. And we talk about the SPS approach. The biggest piece of that is we have the industry's largest network of pre-built, pre-mapped connections. There's 80,000 trading partners that exist in our network. And we say pre-built and pre-mapped because going back to that Walmart example, every customer that we connect into Walmart is using the same reusable connection point. So we're very intentional about utilizing reusable connections so that when you're adding and scaling that growth, if you're getting into Walmart for the first time, you're not worrying about, hey, this is a brand new connection that's being built out to Walmart. It's untested, it's untrue. If you're utilizing SPS, this is a connection that's being used by thousands of vendors already. You know, when we think about Cyber Weekend, there were over 2 million transactions that SPS handled just with Walmart alone with a 99% success rate. The reason for that success rate is because everyone's using that same reusable connection point. So there's built-in scalability. It also means as you add partners, you can get those new partners stood up from a compliance standpoint in as little as 3 to 5 business days, which is obviously very scalable. The other component I think is really important here is to recognize in the same way that Walmart and Target and Cabela's and Fleet Farm leverage EDI to drive a standard process for themselves, customers that are even smaller in size are able to do the same kind of EDI onboarding with their vendor communities. And so if you look at that bottom right corner, we are the preferred testing and certification for over 400 major retailers. These are the largest, most well-known retailers in the business. we have a team that actually allows smaller customers to drive the same kind of EDI compliance. And usually the pushback here is, well, actually my vendors don't do EDI today. That's exactly why this team is so well built. A good example would be a campaign that we did in the last year for Williams-Sonoma. Williams-Sonoma moved and decided, hey, we're taking everyone from our retailer managed portal and we're pushing them over to EDI. And they contracted with SPS to deploy a team to reach out to all 1,300 of their vendors and work on moving them from that retailer portal that Williams-Sonoma managed to EDI. And SPS owned that entire process, from communication to reaching out to those teams, to marketing it, to education, webinars, etc. Well, we can offer that same service to customers of a smaller size that then allows them not just to automate their e-commerce setup with Shopify, along with their 5 traditional EDI trading partners into their Sage 100 system, but also to automate the sending of purchase orders out of that same Sage 100 system to their vendor community. And SPS owns that entire process so that they can have, whether that's 5 vendors or 50 vendors, we can help move them to EDI, and they can really clean up both ends of the equation, both what they're doing with their customers and their traditional EDI setups, as well as with their vendor community. Really just leverages a lot more value in terms of how they can leverage that Sage system they know so well and they've invested so heavily in. We can hop ahead again, Andrew. When we think about the Sage system specifically, what we're really trying to do is untangle the complexity. You know, when you get connected to that first trading partner with EDI, oftentimes the volume isn't really significant, or if it does, you know, have volume to it and you're looking to integrate it into Sage, sometimes it's done on a very custom point-by-point basis. The problem there becomes, as you scale, you begin to have really exponential levels of complexity that are felt all the way into your Sage environment. If every single trading partner is custom mapped point to point into your Sage environment, any sort of change event that happens with, hey, that trading partner has tweaked their 850 requirement, right? That now gets felt all the way into your backend system. The vision that SPS has is to insulate you from those change events. And you can jump forward again, Andrew. The goal here is, again, to use those reusable connections and to build out using those proven connection points to your trading partners to pull them into the SPS fulfillment system, and then to have a single map into your Sage environment that insulates you and your trading partners from any changes you make in Sage or they make on their end. This is why SPS Commerce and our Mapadoc integration software is the Sage certified and Sage preferred solution for how they manage EDI. Sage, like a lot of ERPs out there, really wasn't built with EDI in mind. The reason for that is really everything we've been talking about so far, right? Like EDI is a very complicated, non-standard standard. Every trading partner is doing it differently. And Sage has looked at that and said, hey, we don't want to become experts in EDI in the same way that most customers don't want to become experts in EDI. Having said that, they want to have a standard that they can recommend to their customers that allows them to pull that information into their Sage system. And that's where SPS and our Mapadoc integration tool really shines. It is the Sage preferred and certified solution. And the reason for that is Mapadoc is built from the ground up, leveraging that Sage 100 code. And so it's fully natively embedded into your Sage system. So when you think of your end users that live and breathe and do all their work out of Sage, Mapadoc is just another module that lives along the left-hand side with the other modules. It's truly native to Sage. They're not jumping in and out with a middleware, and allows them to leverage Sage as a true single source of truth. It also means that it works very, very seamlessly with other integrations like ISVs like Scanco. And so not only do you have very, very tight integration into Sage, it's very, very seamless integration with other Sage partners. You can hop forward one more time. All of that to say that that's really who SPS is and how we try to help customers think strategically and holistically about a scalable, automated solution across all of their different order channels. It is that best-in-class technology and tools. It is the process and relationships we have with those trading partners, but it's also the people that allow SPS to deliver on it. sometimes folks will ask, like, hey, in a nutshell, what makes full service and your approach unique? And if I had to really drill into one thing, I would say beyond, a Sage certified solution for the technology, it's the fact that we have 800 people that help us deliver.
Has a head count of 800. That's 2 to 3x the entire head count of our nearest.
800 people that just sit in customer success, customer support facing roles. And when we think of Sage specifically, there's a 60-person team that are Sage specific implementation resources, Sage specific training resources, Sage specific support resources. So when you as a customer raise your hand and say, hey, I need help with something, or we've hired someone new and we just want to make sure they understand best how to leverage and utilize SPS and Mapadoc, at no extra cost, they can raise their hand and they're working with a team of people that exclusively support Sage and really know Sage intimately inside and out. And that's really, really important. You don't want to raise your hand for help and have to wait. You don't want to raise your hand for help and get thrown into a generic queue where the person that's helping you, last minute was working on a completely different system and really doesn't know Sage 100 to the extent that they should. But that's a really major piece that really differentiates SPS in the space. You can go ahead again, Andrew. And here we've actually got a poll question that Andrew's going to deploy. That's really the end of what I was going to show everyone. And so I appreciate you taking the time. The poll here is really kind of a question of what are your priorities for 2022? You can select one of the following here. Is that streamlining order channels? Is it automating orders into Sage? Is it combining order and warehouse automation? Is it automating that warehouse component that Andrew's going to touch on, or is it several of the above? We'd love to just have visibility into, as you envision improving that tech stack for 2022, where are you hoping to explore or capture value? Give you a moment here to interact with that. And really, again, I thank you for the time today. I'll still be on. I'll be available for questions as we go, but it's now transitioning after this poll into Andrew's part of the show.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Matt. That was definitely a load of information that I definitely learned a lot myself there. So thank you so much for that. So now we're going to dive into Scanco Warehouse. And now that you really understand how complex EDI is, and more importantly, how we can really solve it, I really want to take a journey into some of the, inner warehouse type movements and talk about Scanco Warehouse and how Scanco Warehouse can make your business more efficient there. But before I do that, some of you may not be familiar really with who Scanco is. And just to give a quick answer and who Scanco is, we are a leading provider of supply chain automation and services. And really since our inception just over 30 years ago, we've really taken a unique technology-driven approach to some of our customers' pains. And in our 30-year history, we have become extremely close and aligned with Sage, and really have become the publishers of, as you can see, Sage Production Management, Sage Operations Management, even Sage Mobility for Barcode. So as you can see, we have a wide portfolio of options and really tight with Sage as far as a solution provider for Sage. As you can see also, we focus on partnerships like SPS, like the one you're seeing today, not only to enhance our Sage product offering, but really give users the flexibility and functionality really that they're needing on a daily basis. So now that you understand really who Scanco is, I want to quickly touch on some of the components I mentioned on that previous slide. The first one, and really the big one that I want to focus on, is mobility for barcode. Is really the connection inside of Sage for all things mobile and Sage 100. It utilizes mobile apps to automate supply chain and customer-facing transactions, is really a simple way of putting it. Our integration provides real-time mobile connections directly to Sage from any iOS or even Android device that we'll show here towards the end of the presentation. So as we go through the presentation, we will be focusing on the Scanco Warehouse mobile offering today and really highlight some of the advantages that our customers are using on a daily basis. So some of the challenges, that we're going to kind of go through are going to look very familiar to a lot of you. Data entry really kicking off and really being a big pain point for almost everybody that I know. Data entry, one thing I heard in my experience is something called transactional overhead. which is, if you think about it, it's the amount of time and really the cost that data entry is costing your company. I've done many walkthroughs through manufacturing facilities and distribution facilities throughout my career, and I've seen anywhere from just, simply just one person doing data entry all the way up to 10 plus people solely being dedicated and focused to entering data into the ERP for visibility. And really, when you start to manage and really fine tune and start to really look at that cost and how much manpower and time it's really taking for the data to get into the ERP, you really start putting a cost associated with that. The next piece there is really prioritizing orders to really ensure you're meeting the level of customer service to your customers and vendors, right? Matt talked about how, order fulfillment, maybe you have Walmart or Amazon, or maybe you have these big box retailers that you're going to be working with, and you need to be able to manage order fulfillment on a far larger scale. So, and especially in today's world where, order fulfillment has become extremely tough, supply chain has really cramped down, sometimes you don't have all of the availability to send a full order out. So being able to have the flexibility to look at the back orders, look at what customer priorities you have attached to your customers and your vendors, and being able to efficiently get those orders out and have that flexibility is very crucial to be able to keep those relationships strong. The next piece that's directly tied to data entry is visibility. I think if this isn't number 2 on somebody's list, it's definitely going to be number 1, because every company wants to know who's working on what, where their inventory is, how much is reserved, and so we really have to balance this overhead game where bringing too much inventory on hand and you run the risk of having limited cash flow, or not having enough inventory might create the instance where you might have back orders. So ensuring you have the visibility, the know-how to be able to make these educated decisions, and being able to make sure that you have the visibility to be able to make these decisions is really crucial. What's on hand and what's reserved, all of these are tools that Scanco can be able to provide to you to make these really important decisions. And then finally, at least on this list, this has really been a big one that I know if you haven't experienced it yet, you're probably going to sometime in 2022. Ever since 2020, we've really seen kind of a demand for labor out there in the workforce. And so we really need to focus on making it easy to onboard new staff and really use intuitive, easy to use software, not only just to be able to get productivity out of our employees and be able to maximize our ROI, but be able to keep our employees happy and enjoying their work, And so by able to deploy the Scanco software, Scanco warehouse software, it really takes out the guessing games for what to pick and where to go in certain instances. By us being able to deploy our logic, we're able to direct users on a case-by-case basis to what they should actually be doing. So most of you know these pains, and that is really where Scanco Warehouse comes in to improve these workflows and increase efficiency throughout the warehouse. So today I'm really going to focus on 3 aspects that are really the most common to our customers, so you can really understand the difference between what might be an existing process today and if you establish Scanco Warehouse for your business and what that might look like. And the first one we're really going to dive into is that number 1 pain point that we were talking about, which is data entry. Today, typically when you're receiving inventory in, you might have your bay door, you might have a dedicated person that's going to be able to look at that packing slip and essentially check off everything that's on that packing slip to ensure that everything that you ordered was actually received in correctly. But maybe you're a food manufacturer, or maybe you distribute maybe electrical components, and you might have lot or serialized codes in there. That can be extremely time intensive, not only just to be able to make sure all the numbers throughout a 13-digit serial number might be there, or just making sure that the lot numbers are actually correct and actually written down correctly on the packing slip. A perfect example of this might be the hieroglyphs example that I like to use, where is it a number 1? Is it a number 7? Sloppy handwriting is oftentimes a really big catalyst for wrong data entry. And as we know, if the data is not going into your system correctly, that'll cause a million problems down the line. So when we implement the Scanco warehouse software, as you can kind of see here through the iPod example here, you can actually have a real-time integration with your Sage environment. So you can simply go to the receiving icon. It talks real time, so you can see all the purchase orders live within your Sage system. And then as you actually scan the items, it'll actually validate in real time whether or not that item was on that packing slip, if the right quantities are being received, et cetera. That way, essentially ensuring all of the data you're collecting is first and foremost correct, at which point in time, once it is validated as being correct, you could hit send, and then it's instantly inside your Sage system, eliminating all of that data entry. So all of those people that you may have had, sitting down, entering in all of your items that are being received into the warehouses, transferred within the warehouses, et cetera, all of that data entry is completely eliminated. Next, we want to focus on is fulfillment. And this really goes back to ever since 2020 and supply chain issues and really struggling with being able to manage order fulfillment on a large scale. So Matt talked a lot about how EDI can kind of untangle those webs and how they can manage those vendor relationships. And that is all 100% fantastic. But the second it actually gets into your system, now we need to direct the users, and we need to be able to manage which orders are actually going out and which orders should be actually saving to minimize shipping costs. So some of the examples that we see here is for what we call allocating or reserving certain items for specific sales orders. So you can attach, let's say, a Walmart or an Amazon as a higher priority code than maybe somebody that you're not doing as much business with, to ensure that the Walmarts and the Amazons are taken care of before anybody else. On top of that, we can set fill rates. So maybe to minimize our shipping costs, we only want to send orders out that have 90% or more of a fill rate for that order. And then as we are able to manage that inventory, then we can direct the users on what to pick. Using the scanners, we can direct the users to the correct bins. We can do one sales order at a time or even multiple sales orders at a time. And just like on the receiving side, as we are going through and using the software, we're validating in real time. And we're ensuring that the items that are picked are actually on those sales orders, minimizing those shipping errors and minimizing those shipping costs. And then lastly is really visibility. Again, kind of going back to what the norm is, in a basic Sage system, you're allowed one item per bin. And a lot of you may already know that, and that could obviously become a really big nightmare. So basically what we do is we can actually add bin logic to your existing system, being able to have and segregate your items not only from a bin standpoint, but you could even set region codes. So maybe you want to separate dry goods from refrigerated goods, or maybe you want to separate electrical components from different components, et cetera. So being able to segregate and manage and really be able to fine tune your Sage system to really be able to work for you is a really easy way and really intuitive way to be able to manage your order flow and be able to ensure that everybody's getting the correct orders in the correct matter of time. So now that we really kind of understand the Scanco warehouse and how the Scanco warehouse application actually automates these transactions, we want to look at how Scanco warehouse works specifically with EDI and SPS Commerce. So it's very simple. When it comes to the Scanco warehouse software, we're going to be using the actual scanners that are placed in each employee's hands to direct them on what product should actually be picked. And as we go through and as the scanner is validating these transactions and validating the items are correct that are being picked, we're going to minimize those mistakes. And at which point in time, instead of, what Matt was talking about with those ASN labels and the requirements that are being put onto these vendors, we can actually trigger the scanner to hit that ASN label, print out the ASN label, and again, just take one more step out of that process and kind of shorten it to make it more efficient. So again, instead of sending out the paper and writing things down and handing the paper in to be input, everything can be collected in real time on the scanner, at which point in time the scanner could actually validate the transactions. It could trigger the ASN label. All of the information automatically goes into your Sage system. So therefore, there's no data entry, your mistakes are minimized, and you're really been able to take your EDI to the next level with a complemented Scanco warehouse solution. So a lot of people ask me, what kind of hardware can I use? And it's very kind of intuitive. We work with both iOS and Android. And as you can see here, we do have options for both. So this could be something as simple as like an iOS device, like an iPod, that would have a case that goes around it and then would actually have an imager at the very top there that would be able to scan those barcodes. A lot of people ask me, Andrew, with an iPod, can we just use the camera that's on the scanner or on the actual iPod? And the answer to that is these imagers that we use on these scanning devices, they're very high tech. They're meant to actually scan barcodes where, using a camera isn't really the most intuitive way to use things. So we always recommend the sled for the iPod version there. However, if you wanted to go to an Android device, like the TC51 or the TC70, these are all-in-one devices, and they're very robust, they're very rugged, and again, give you an alternative option on different scanning hardware that you can be able to use, and these would be essentially the devices that your users would be using as they're directed through the warehouse. So with that being said, we're going to switch over to our next poll, and we're going to ask everybody, for how many of you are attending, how many of you are using Scanco warehouse automation? How many are using EDI? How many are using both? Or how many are using none of the above? One of the things that in talking with Matt and visiting with him in November up in Minnesota is talking about how many customers we actually have that own both of our products, however, don't have our EDI integration. It's a very simple and very easy piece of software to be able to deploy. And it's very intuitive and very easy to use. So one of the things that we definitely want to make sure of is that we have a perfect idea of who wants to be able to be followed up with, and who might take the best advantage of being able to have both of our softwares complementing each other. So with that being said, I'm going to close this poll. Thank you everybody for doing that, and we are going to move right over into our summary. So I'm going to ask Matt, why don't you jump right back in and bring us home with the EDI.
Thanks, Andrew. And I do have to point out, Andrew came up to Minnesota to visit SPS, but it was in November, not in January, because it is -11 right now outside. So he's from Florida, and as a smart Floridian, he avoided the temperatures that are currently happening. Having said that, I think he makes a great point. It's interesting to us how often companies are very intentional in automating and getting things set up, but sometimes don't connect the dots in terms of how one level of automation with maybe their order to cash process where SPS helps them can also be linked with automation they're driving in their warehouse like Scanco provides. And it really is a very simple and seamless way to connect those. It's very, very cost effective. And it's a great way just to make sure that you're really leveraging everything Sage can do, but really removing as many manual workflows out of the process as possible, which obviously right now where you've got a lot of folks potentially calling in sick, et cetera, the less manual you are, the less risk you have involved. On the SPS side of things and the EDI and omni-channel order to cash, at a high level, SPS is about delivering people processing technology to really become your order to cash provider, managing the entire process on your behalf so that you have a truly scalable, truly streamlined, full service solution so that you are insulated from risk and have something that can really grow with you and be a tool that promotes and empowers your growth and doesn't become a bottleneck to your ability to keep up with orders as demand increases. And that's really our vision, is to stand in with that differentiated full service approach. And the way we deliver that obviously is that unique technology, the pre-built network that we have of 80,000 pre-built connections in network, but really it's those 800 customer support people who stand up that 24/7/365 differentiated support. You can jump ahead again, Andrew.
Awesome. And from my end, I do want to thank everybody for joining today and taking the time to meet with us. We hope it was very beneficial, and we hope that you learned a lot today. One thing I do want to point out for those of you who are part of the Scanco family, if you do want more information or just simply want to be able to have a quick call with our team, Matt, myself, and any one of our CAMs, we would be happy to set that up for you. So please reach out to your CAM. For those of you who might not be a part of the Scanco family just yet, or maybe are part of the SPS family, and maybe if you want more information, please feel free to reach out to Matt, and we'll be able to kind of connect the pieces here, as we have an extremely strong relationship, and we'll be happy to coordinate those efforts for everybody. But ultimately, we can build a tailored demo very quickly for you and get everything installed and implemented for you in a very efficient fashion with this integration. Because again, the Scanco warehouse piece is very robust. The EDI portion is an efficiency tool that is more or less added on if you actually need it. So we'll be happy to have those conversations with you at a later point in time, whenever you are ready. But with that being said, I do want to open it up. I did see a question here, Matt, that is specifically for you. And it says, I hear so many complaints about Amazon being difficult to work with. And difficult is really an understatement. How does life change with Amazon and SPS?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's a couple components that go into connecting to Amazon. You have obviously Amazon Seller Central and Amazon Vendor Central. And really the goal with how we interact and handle that data from Amazon is to, again, if possible, and if the order volumes justify it, to pull it into your Sage environment so that you're not having to manually have those interactions with the order to cash process, but then really doing work where SPS can manage the communication with Amazon in terms of any changes that are happening in that environment. There's always going to be points with retailers where different retailers work differently and have different levels of difficulty. But one of the things that SPS really prides ourselves on is actually helping to improve the relationship between a vendor and a retailer or an e-commerce provider like Amazon, and really actually improving those vendor scorecards. And so doing things that we can that help to, whether that's sending inventory levels and inventory updates to a retailer or to Amazon or someone so that they have really helpful data. It's also sometimes helping to automate how you share product and item information. You'll have companies like Wayfair, Amazon, et cetera, that require a lot of item attributes that allow them to display correctly details about your product that they're selling on their websites, right? And a lot of times that's a very, very manual process, and it's really frustrating both for the vendor and for the retailer, whether that's Amazon or Wayfair or another. We actually have a product that's called Assortment. That's the only product of its kind in the market that allows you to automate across all the different trading partners you work with a way to send item and product data in a single fashion, so that you're not having to have, if there's 10 different trading partners you're working with, 10 different processes for sending that data. And so with somebody like Amazon, it really cleans up and streamlines how you can send information to them so that you make sure that you have the correct information up on their website, but also then improves that vendor relationship because it just cleans up. The more automated we can make the interactions with the trading partner, the less likelihood there is for error, and just the easier it is to have a relationship with them so that when you do raise your hand for help, it's just, it's a strong relationship. And one of the things they check is, what is that vendor scorecard, as they're looking to continue that relationship. And when you've automated more of the process, we see really significant upticks in what those vendor scorecards look like for customers. And that just improves the relationship across the board, and it makes for a stronger partnership between the customer and the retailer. And we're happy to talk more about that assortment product too. We didn't touch on that today, but that's one with Amazon and really anyone that's in that e-commerce or marketplace space that really is, there's someone at your business that's owning a world of pain when it comes to item and product data and how they have to send that in different ways to different retailers. And there's actually a very intuitive, very cost-effective way to automate that, so it's a streamlined single process for all the different trading partners you work with.
Fantastic. Awesome. Well, I do not see any other questions here for today, but that does not mean that we are afraid to take your calls or anything like that. So please feel free talk with your team. If you have any questions, or again, if you'd like to be able to see a demo, our contact information is on the screen. Please feel free to reach out to us and we'll be happy to set that up. Thank you so much, Matt, for joining us today. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Have a wonderful day, and we'll talk to you next month on next month's webinar. Take care and have a wonderful day.
Thanks, everybody.